Before we go into our interview today, I wanted to let everyone know we have a new sponsor for our Energy Question podcast, the U.S. Oil and Gas Association, or USOGA for short. First established in 1917, USOGA has been an effective and creative voice for the industry for more than a century now. USOGA is dedicated to educating the public, policymakers, and legislators at the federal, state, and local levels about the value of the domestic oil and natural gas industry. If you're in the industry and not currently a USOGA member, please consider joining the association as a way of helping it tell your story to the policymakers whose actions impact everything you do each and every day. You can start that process by contacting USOGA through its website, usoga.org. Thanks so much to USOGA for sponsoring the Energy Question podcast. And now on with our show.
Hey, welcome to the Energy Question with David Blackman. I'm your host, David Blackman. My very special guest today is a return guest, Christopher Messina, CEO of mining company Tanbreez, which has plans to produce mass quantities of rare earth minerals in southern Greenland in the near future. Christopher, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me back on, David. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. I caught a cold over the holidays, and I still haven't managed to shake it. So if my voice sounds a little funny, that's the reason. Listen, man, before we get going, this is our second time talking to you on the Energy Question, but remind everybody about Tanbreez and about this incredible deposit of rare earth minerals in Greenland, and give us a general status update.
You bet. I appreciate it, especially since, if you type rare earths into Bing or another search engine, to remain nameless, today, you'll get all sorts of current articles about the importance of rare earth minerals, what they mean to the energy transition, to modernizing technology, to alloys, to how critical they are to the West. In addition, you'll find stuff going back to 1986 about Deng Xiaoping in China, saying China wants to dominate the rare earth space as a mercantilist, monopolistic policy for national growth. Tanbreez basically drives a stake through the heart of that Chinese fantasy. My chairman and now partner, Greg Barnes, staked this property out 23 years ago, basically, in Greenland. It's on the southern tip of Greenland. It is a gargantuan ore deposit. For those people who don't understand mining or know how mining works, right, you might easily open up a mine that has 10 to 15 years life in it, right? You mine it at a certain rate, the ore is gone, but that's worth it. If it's big enough, rich enough, it's worth doing. Mining our deposit at 3 to 5 million tons per year, which is a pretty good clip for a specialty minerals mine, we run out of material in 800 years. What that means is, for all intents and purposes, we have all the rare earth materials that Europe and the US, potentially the globe, need for the foreseeable future. So many other mining prospects are perfectly excellent, right? They're interesting. They're of a certain size. You'd be worth investing in them. Some of them are listed on penny stock exchanges. We are privately held, and we are the world's largest rare earth deposit, period, outside of China and potentially inside China too. It's very hard to understand their statistics that, see if they're, as my mother used to call them, see if they're creative writing. So that's where we are. 30% of the rare earths we have are the heavy rare earths. If people go look at that, they'll realize that massive businesses like MP Materials, which do a great business out of Mountain Pass, California, 95+% of their deposit is light rare earths, which are more common, which are less valuable, and they're not critical largely for the materials that the military needs in the US and that the energy transition needs.
So rare earth minerals in general, on the table of elements, what numbers do the rare earths occupy? It's like 108 and higher or something.
Yeah, it's those two call-out lines below, which always confuse the hell out of people, and they hope to get through high school chemistry and never think about it again, and why all of a sudden all of those 9 or 13 fit in between that little slice between the first and second table. It's lanthanide series, basically, from lanthanum onwards. And again, the number's a good question. If I were a chemist, I
can't remember.
Know that better. But it's they're all very because of their chemical properties, because of the place they sit in the periodic table, they all have similar magnetic and other very strong tensile properties. But they also, because they're all very chemically similar, are very hard to break apart. Right. And so that's part of their allure, is not just that they're valuable, but you have to find a way to extract them profitably from the ore body you have. And luckily for us, the type of ore body we have is eudialyte, which is different than the other two ore bodies that every other rare earth mine in the world mines, which are bastosite and monazite. More information than your listeners need, but it's incredibly important for us because it cheapens our processing cost.
Yeah, and so basically for the energy transition, for renewables, for electric vehicle batteries, the magnetic properties of these minerals are critically important to manufacturing magnets, basically, that are used in electric vehicle applications and other applications, and also really important for the defense industry, right?
Insanely important for defense industry. Every single Iron Dome rocket that goes up that takes down a terrorist missile takes 200 kilograms of rare earths with it. And those are, I hate making this joke, those are non-recyclable. So for those people who think we're going to recycle our way out of our rare earth deficit, many of the main uses are literally non-recyclable. So no, we
Thank
need.
you. Thank you so much for making that point. You can't believe how many times I have idiots telling me that. It's just, the disinformation that's out there on this and other energy subjects is just overwhelming. And that's one bit of it.
Yep.
Um, So the Biden administration has made a huge deal out of announcing that they're permitting a new rare earth mineral. Actually, I think there's a couple of new mines that have gotten permits in the United States. One's in Wyoming, and if I remember right, the other's in California somewhere. What's the magnitude of the one in Wyoming? Let's just focus on that compared to the resource that you're wanting to develop in Greenland.
Yeah. On a scale of 0 to 10, leaving aside the Spinal Tap 11, that deposit in Wyoming is I think somewhere around irrelevant. And I wish them well economically, right? It's and God bless the owner for realizing he's got a coal mine that all coal deposits have with them some residual amount of rare earth elements, just to how they form, but they're not in big concentrations. But it comes up a lot because it's a particular fantasy of some portion of the American political establishment who hate coal with their souls, right? But if they could if they could perform kind of political alchemy, if you'll allow me, by turning the evil devil coal into magical, wonderful fairy dust that makes things really great in the energy transition, then wouldn't that be awesome? Right. Again, it's not that there are no rare earths in the deposit. It's just that they are minuscule amounts of the deposit and would only be worth extracting because the coal is there, it's metallurgical coal, to make a profit. So again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's certainly not large enough to handle even a couple of years of the U.S. military's needs. Again, from our understanding, I'm not claiming to have read the reports carefully, but in terms of what the U.S. aggregate needs or North America needs for both civilian and domestic uses, it's a drop in the pan. It's a wonderful PR stunt, and I give them credit, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah. So the situation we're in, folks, is that the United States is already dependent on a Chinese dominated market for our rare earth mineral needs. And that's not getting any better. It's getting worse. China completely dominates this market, not just the production and manufacture of these minerals, but also the processing of them. And what germinated this interview is that China recently announced that it's now going to prohibit the export of key technologies and equipment needed for the processing of rare earth minerals. Talk about why that story is now important to our prospects here in the United States.
Well, ironically, I think that story is wonderful because it's the ultimate red herring, because all of this technology was created in the West to begin with. Hitachi.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. So the know-how to do this is, first of all, already here. Second, there was a bit of a stoosh years ago when Hitachi bought a bunch of patents from an American owner. I can't remember. I should know that. But and then they built up a plant in North Carolina, and then they went out of business. Right. So that didn't work. It was a bunch of patents around sintering magnets, which again, for those people who have never tangled with the patent system, there's a naive belief that it really is about innovation, right? And there was that old line like, well, you can't patent the wheel. I tell you, give me a smart enough set of attorneys, I will patent the wheel.
Yeah.
And so So the patent system functions somewhat correctly, but many times it does not. And here's a great example. So there was a patent granted on basically doing with ore what Copper and Bronze Age humans did thousands of years ago. I tell you what, I'm going to heat up these rocks, and when the metal comes out, I'm going to form it into something. This time it's going to be called a ring. That's called sintering suddenly, not forging, and that's going to be patentable. Bing, and they won. Right, so now they have the patent, and then Hitachi, of course, has lots of money. Only thing that really matters in patents is not innovation, is not intelligence, is not a truly new invention. It is, do you have enough money to pay lawyers to attack people? And they did. And so, but the sweet, sweet beauty of this is, after they went out of business, an American firm went and bought the old machinery out of the Hitachi plant, which I guarantee you, whoever was the official at Hitachi that sold this pile of scrap metal got the biggest bonus in Hitachi's history and 3 rungs of promotion at once, because it was basically taking scrap they had to remediate and sold it for a profit. So good for them. I digress. The Chinese have said that they're not going to allow the technologies they use for processing, especially heavy rare earths, out of the country. Well, it doesn't really matter because the technology we're using already exists. Doesn't matter. We're already building forward on that. But it's more of a signaling mechanism. They also indicated they're going to stop allowing the export of the heavy rare earths, which is kind of funny because it's kind of like saying, I'm really hungry. I have 2 muffins. I eat 2 muffins, and then I'm going to tell the world that I'm no longer exporting muffins. Meaning they're already using all their materials. So the announcement itself was pure political theater. For whatever reason, they thought this was worthwhile. And I'm glad because it drew attention to this problem. Suddenly, oh my God, we're not going to get heavy rare earths. Okay. Well, you can just, come to Tanbreez. We'll take care of it for you because we've got centuries worth of it. That's basically my reading of it. So it's one more signaling mechanism that the Chinese are making, in part to put smaller companies on notice, or put users of potential magnets on notice that you might be in violation of some weird Chinese regulation. And they have proven, the CCP has proven to be industrially very vindictive over the years. So what I mean by that is, if you are a Brazilian, or doesn't matter, some country, and you have a rare earth mine and you send your concentrate to China for processing, right? If suddenly someone in your own country comes up with a processing plant, but they can only handle about half your output, if you then decide, well, I'll process half my output here and I'll send the rest to China, the Chinese are so vindictive that they will refuse to take your extra. Actually, no, correct. They will take it. That's just the last check you're ever going to get from them. So there's a lot at play here, but the Chinese are, I think, playing a fool's game by trying to go back to a world of complete dominance. They're not going to have it anymore.
So where does the U.S., I assume we do some processing of rare earths here in the United States now, right? I mean, this isn't a situation like lithium where we have virtually no processing capability at all right now in lithium.
Correct.
These rare earths, we're doing it here in the United States now.
I can only speak to the solution we're using, which is the plant is being built, the industrial scale plant. The kind of 1/3 size test plant has been running and working fine. So that's already happening in North America. And when our plant is finished in the US, we'll be processing here. I know, I'm just guessing. I'm not guessing. Folks like DuPont and some others, I know that they've got some capability and they've been working with others to process some rare earths. So yeah, it's certainly not yet at the scale in China, but the capability is here. And hopefully that last announcement will spur even greater investment to get it done faster. It's not a matter of the know-how, it's a matter of, do the end users finally perceive, as they should have for years already, that the Chinese represent a very serious threat. Not that they should. And I find this whole thing partially insane, because who cares? But clearly they do. That if you really want to make sure that you have the materials that you require, both militarily and for domestic uses, you have to diversify your supply chain. There has to be a robust processing capability of the U.S. It's just rational.
Yeah, sure, of course. So where, companies today, if they're not getting rare earths for their magnets and batteries and whatever else they use it for, and I don't know all the other uses, where are they, if they're not getting it from China, where would it be coming in from today?
Well, mainly it is coming from China. I mean, that's
It is. Okay.
it really is like 80, I think 88% of processing is done there. Um, and partially my joke about the muffins was that the Chinese, I conceptually I break up the Chinese approach to global competition in two buckets. One I call legitimate competition, and one is illegitimate in my mind,
Yeah.
right? So legitimate is you invest money, right? They churn out more PhDs in advanced material science in a week than the West does in a year. So that to me is legitimate investment in your capability, in your industrial capability. And they provide tax incentives to companies that build things in China, and they still have cheap labor. So they've been somewhat very successful at that. And so more and more of the magnets and alloys and screens and all and things you do with the different rare earths, they are producing and they're using that material themselves. So that's my joke about the muffins is like, I could declare I'm not selling you muffins. Well, that's because I had to eat both of them. So I don't have any to sell, but I'm going to make a statement that I'm not selling them. It's a little bit odd. And then a lot of other folks have found, as we did with one European company, God bless them, who were very, very secure in their risk management. They had diversified their supply, right? So we did a little bit of a project with them. We did a little bit of studying with them. Turned out that their engineers were rock solid sure that they were getting their rare earths from, I think, 4 different independent suppliers, right? When we spoke with those independent suppliers, they were all buying from the same company in China. So basically, they're paying an extra layer for fake diversification. They thought they were buying from 4 sources, they were buying from 1.
Well, this all gets back to a point I make probably too often in the things I write. And that is that the direction we're headed in this energy transition, we've got these 3 industries, wind and solar and electric vehicles, that have been declared the solution by the global elites who run the Western world. And all the subsidies are going to go into them. And isn't this all inevitably taking us to a place, unless our government suddenly becomes interested in a resource like Tanbreez? Aren't we inevitably headed to a place where we're going to become almost entirely reliant on China for our energy security here in the United States and really every other Western nation, right?
Yep. If we actually went down this ridiculous path that the people who get on their private jets to fly to Dubai to talk about how awful carbon is, I just can't stop. I mean, they're their own parody. I mean,
Oh my God.
you don't need the Babylon Bee when you have COP28.
Yeah, I got a lot of material out of that.
God. And John, first off, the Secretary of the UN, who never cares about people being killed in Syria, suddenly cares a lot about Gazan terrorists who murder Jews. That
of course,
bombs are dropping on them. But he had to take a break from the. According to him, not only are we facing global warming, which someone should tell him it's no longer that, it's climate change. But anyway, not only is he outdated in his terminology, but the globe is boiling. I mean, they're just insane. Just absolutely insane. So the good news is I think we will keep drilling for oil and natural gas here in the US. We will become energy independent once again, as we were just 2 years ago. I wonder what the difference was. Anyway, this is not the first time we've gotten there. E. Cummings wrote about this, right? About the we sold all the scrap metal from the Second Avenue elevated train to Japan, and they turned it into bullets to shoot at our boys in Guam, right?
Right.
So there's nothing new under the sun, sadly. And the technologies that we have and we've developed are dependent upon a lot of these materials. Other sources are being developed. It's not entirely a vacuum. But the main thing, again, I'm beating Tanbreez's drum, not just because it's my book, but also even if I were not involved in Tanbreez, as an American citizen, I would say here is finally literally the only mine that can ignore the Chinese, because our deposit is large enough to support our own processing plant, support all of the downstream applications, and feed all those people without them having to make that decision too, because part of that stoosh in 2010, 2011, around the Senkaku Islands between Japan and China, where the Chinese got angry and then they stopped, selling rare earths to the South Koreans and the Japanese in kind of retaliation for that. that's what they're willing to do. So there are already other materials coming along. I say this because at Tanbreez, it's so large that we can support our own processing infrastructure. Because if anyone else tries to compete with them, they will suddenly find out that they can't get their ore processed anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, for my audience, people need to think about this Tanbreez mine as essentially the Saudi Arabia of rare earth minerals, or the Permian
Exactly.
Basin.
But a
You know,
little
I mean,
colder.
a lot colder, but it is on the southern coast.
It isn't the southern coast. It's frankly no worse than Detroit. In terms of
Right.
it's not that cold. It's really
Yeah.
just not. And we're right
How
on
many?
the ocean.
Just out of curiosity, give people some orientation sense about this. How many miles is it from where that mine is located to the east coast of the United States?
Oh, yeah, well, it's closer it's closest to Nova Scotia. There used to be a flight between Nova Scotia and the west coast of Greenland. That flight was about
Right.
an hour and 40 minutes. I mean, it's
Yeah. I mean,
nothing,
it's
right?
yeah.
This is you should from New York to Nook, which is the main city, should be about the flight time to Chicago, right? So
Yeah.
it's not. It's right now. It's a pain because they haven't built a long enough airstrip. So you have to fly unless you got your own G5, which is lovely. You have to fly either to Copenhagen or Reykjavik and then fly backwards. So it takes a while to get there, and it's 56,000 people, but it's a insanely mineral rich place. The United States, it should be a state. Frankly, it was offered to us in 1850 when we bought Alaska,
Well,
and
Trump wanted to buy it.
after that wanted to buy it. And as Kenneth Hood, the ambassador from Greenland to the U.S., says to me repeatedly, which is that Greenland is open for business but not for sale. So we missed that window. But it's a great bunch of folks. They mining is a core pillar of their four-pillar development plan for the country as they separate out completely from Denmark. And I want to make that point because one of the things we've discovered, especially in the global capital markets, which, as you've dealt with investors around the world, right? Every genius in London, New York, Houston, San Francisco, got to be the smartest person in the room. So clearly they know everything, even when they don't.
Oh, of course. Yes.
And I blame myself for being as awful, I'm sure. But Greenland is such a small place. And a lot of the official news is carried out in Greenlandic, which nobody else speaks, or Danish, which kind of close
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
that. There's anyone that great line like a lie will travel around the world twice before the truth gets its shoes on, right? I've heard more insanity from supposedly brilliant people in the know in London and Frankfurt and New York, like, oh, Greenland's against mining. Really? Who said? From whom? Well, a guy, and it's just ridiculous because Greenland
Right.
is not closed for mining. They're wide open for mining. And when I explained this to some ministers just a couple of weeks ago, we were on a chat about, something. We're actually going to be a big part of their economy once we get this launched. And I explained to them that there's just a massive amount of misconception about Greenland. They were kind of baffled. They're like, but why? I mean, it's clear we're open for business. We love mining. We want mines. And it's just something to emphasize to your listeners, because if anyone here is wise enough to get out of oil and gas and invest in mining, give me a call. But remember that if you ask your buddy who says, Greenland, they hate mining, don't listen to them.
So, you have been working on this Tanbreez project for quite a few years, and it was active. You were active in trying to develop it during the Trump years, and
Yep.
The federal government didn't seem much more interested then than it does now.
Nope.
Will a change of administrations again have a better impact, you think, this time?
Well, the only thing that changes, I think, is that we're in the early innings of World War III, and those
Yeah.
people who believe that are living in a dream world. So I've tried to play the Washington D.C. game to the extent that I refuse to spend $2 million a month on lobbyists. So I guess I'm playing it right. But in my mind, right, the Army Corps of Engineers should get on a boat and go to Greenland and build my mine for me right now.
Right.
They should. I mean, they absolutely
Yeah.
should, right? The Israelis need it, NATO needs it, US needs it. And as I pointed out to multiple politicians who can't get away from me when I corner them for a second, and then they scurry away quickly, as is their wont. This was, I think, October 14th or 15th. I said, you do understand that all the material we buy comes from a country that just sent a carrier group to meet ours in the Mediterranean. Like,
Yeah.
am I the only one? Sometimes, this is not a comparison about grandiosity, just about prescience. Sometimes I feel like Winston Churchill at the end of World War One, telling the Navy, don't melt down those guns, wrap them in oil and burlap because we're going to need them again.
Yeah.
And we're there. And all of our technology depends on these materials. Every carrier that gets built takes 9,000 pounds of these rare earths that go into it. Every fighter jet that goes up takes 800 pounds. Every rocket that goes up, again, non-recyclable, takes between 50 to 300 pounds. Like, we need these materials, and the only source in the West large enough to accommodate all of those needs for decades is Tanbreez.
Yeah. Well, I wish you luck. I know we'll be talking about this again in the future, probably the near future. There's always going to be more events in this realm to talk about. And
Yep.
I sure do appreciate your time. Tell folks where they can get in touch with you and follow what you're doing.
Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, it's you just go to the website. It's Tanbreez, again, terrible name, but it's an acronym of the minerals of tantalum, niobium, rare earths, and zirconium that make up our mines. It's TANBREEZ.com. You just shove it in the description. And you can, there's a contact me form there. Feel free to reach out. It's exciting to be part of. It really is truly exciting to be part of something that this is significantly world impacting, both for global markets, for security, for diversification, for balance of trade, for all that sort of stuff. And the U.S., sadly, with the exception of 2 or 3 states, is almost incredibly hard to get a mining permit in. It's really, really hard. You've got this not in my backyardism. You got processes that drag on for years. And in Greenland, they've shown that you can do this. Even a small country can do this efficiently, effectively, with an Intelligent Mines Act that, all the environmental standards and guardrails that are superior, quite frankly, than many I've seen in many other jurisdictions. Talented workforce, beautiful geographical location, a little chilly for Floridians like me, but, I'm not going to be doing the mining. So yeah, no, I'm excited. I've seen a lot of interesting things in my career, and this is the best one. I'm just proud to be part of it.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. I hope 2024 is the year you get this done, and we'll be back in touch soon. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you to our extraordinary producer, Eric Burrell, to the Sandstone Group for hosting our podcast, and to the folks at the U.S. Oil and Gas Association for being our sponsor. I'm David Blackman. That's all for now.